All right, we're back. This is our final interview of 17 hours of webcast to try and raise some awareness about what's going on for real people in the world right now and what could be happening to millions of people if the eviction orders are lifted and people lose their homes over the pandemic. And so we just thought it was fitting that we take a minute and head back out to Paradise, California. The beautiful Melissa Crick is standing right there at the Paradise Memorial, the Campfire Memorial for the campfire victims. And we wish you had better news for us, Melissa.
Yeah, I was just sharing that we have a couple of local fires this morning, and we are not at risk currently. I'm very safe where I'm standing, but we don't trust that anymore in Paradise. Fire travels very quickly over our mountain ridges locally. So you can see behind me our beautiful orange sunrise, which is very pretty, but for us in California, orange means fire. So that's smoke that makes that color. And so one of the reasons I choose to stand here is that our lookout tower is just a kind of behind that bright orange spot there on one of our highest peaks locally, Sawmill Peak. So I was just kind of taking a look at what's going on up there, the activity. But also, I'm standing at Magalia Community Church. I'll pan this way and you can see the white tents here. I wanted to stop in here this morning for a couple of reasons. To share what they're doing because it's very impactful in the community, and then also share with you this memorial here so you can see it says Butte Strong. And this was created by a local organization. We call them the Clampers. Their name is E-Clampus Vitus. So what it is it's bricks. I'm going to come down so you can see. It's bricks from some of the homes that burned. So they actually they offered people the opportunity to take a brick, and I'll show you the border as well of this memorial.
And if you couldn't hear Melissa, those are the bricks from you kind of your sound went out. Those are the bricks from homes that burned, and they wrote the address on the brick, and all of those bricks used to be somebody's home. It's just remarkable.
Yeah. So this was one of the memorials. We have one. We're actually in Magalia right now, which is a smaller community just above Paradise. They sort of merged together, but it's Magalia, which lost over a third of their community as well. And these bricks are from all over Paradise, Magalia, anywhere that was affected by the fire. So they built this lovely memorial, which is breathtaking for many reasons, especially for us locals. But it's a nice, quiet place that people like to come and kind of reflect and think. And then it happens to be housed at Magalia Community Church, which is right here. And I wanted to talk a little bit about them. And they're not quite up yet, so I don't want to disturb them too much. But you had asked yesterday what people could do to help. And you can reach out to this organization. They are one of the last sort of boots on the ground resources in the community where people can come physically and ask for things like food and clothing and that sort of thing. We had pre-fire many food pantries, resource organizations on the ridge, but they all burned down. And so we have this one, and we have what's called the Hope Center in Paradise, which is really what's left right now for people who need help in the moment. So they're prepping right now for their drive-through food service that they're doing. Before COVID, it was not drive-through, but they are crafty and they're making it work. So in about an hour, they'll have cars line up behind these tents, and they'll come in and they'll be given food and then offered whatever other resources they need. They can fill out kind of a questionnaire and ask for whatever help it is they need. And their website is magaliacommunitychurch.org, and that's MAGALIA. So they're a fantastic resource. They actually have, I'm going to walk over there a little bit. I don't want to disturb them too much, but they're actually still housing a number of displaced survivors here as well. They've got about 18 or so trailers on the property. And I saw a few tents when I came in as well. So it's not only a resource center, it's doubling as emergency housing for folks. They also put in a shower facility, and I'm going to try to show you that.
And laundry.
Showers and laundry. And we have survivors that are traveling from the surrounding communities, How Chico, Orville, people will travel up to an hour and a half to get here, both for showers, laundry, food, all sorts of things. So the need is still very real in this community. So I'm going to kind of pan around and show you. Go ahead.
I want to tell a real quick story. My book, The New Left Out in America, that's going to be out in a couple of months here, is there's a story that I love, and I just want to tell the story because I think Pastor Matthew is going to love this story. The pastor at this church had taken in a homeless fellow that had nowhere to go, and it was a couple of days before the fire. And so the pastor and his wife were not up there when the fire struck. The only person at the church was this homeless guy that he had taken in and taken care of. And the homeless guy got a hose and protected the church.
Wow.
And somebody had donated a jacket that had reflective tape on it. Now he's in the middle of a fire and he gets this jacket with the reflective tape. And every time a helicopter carrying water went overhead, he ran out into the thing and he started waving his arm, and the helicopter would drop water on the church.
Wow.
Then he thought, oh my God, the trees that are next to the church are going to take the church down. And this story, an old atheist, this is my favorite story. So there are all these trees, and he says, out of nowhere came a man with a chainsaw. He had no idea where this man came from, and the man with the chainsaw helped him cut the trees down that were encroaching on the church, and they saved the church. And when he turned around to thank the guy with the chainsaw, he was gone. He disappeared. He didn't exist. And that story is a new book. And it's so amazing that if he hadn't helped a homeless man, the whole church and the community center would have been lost.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah. And for everything around this is pretty much gone. We had Ridgeview High School is across the street. You can't see it, unfortunately. Kitty Corner, you really can't see it because it was a total loss. It burned to the ground. So the fact that this structure survived is a miracle. But so I want to show you over here, this trailer is their laundry and shower service. And then you can see I'll get a little closer. You can see their makeshift drive-through setup for their food and other services this morning. So again,
I want to ask you a question about the laundry and the shower. Are they paying for that? Is it donated? Did they set it up themselves? What happened?
It comes out of donations. So they are funding it solely out of donations.
So if people want to send $10, they can help pay for that.
Yes, and there's a PayPal link on the website. You can send $5, $10, as much as you can. Anything helps. This one is really close to my heart because they've received some opposition, if you can believe that, because people don't like the big tents. They call it Tent City. It's not aesthetically pleasing to the community sometimes. And there's a belief that having resources like this, that you're enabling some folks that could do a little better, right? There's always that lack of understanding for folks that haven't experienced homelessness, haven't experienced, real true poverty. And so we see that particularly with this organization. So they're one of the ones that I keep at the top of my list in terms of pushing resources their direction and really trying to help in any way that I can to make sure that they stay funded, because the folks that are at the most risk, that need the most help, come here regularly. And that's also true for Hope Church in Paradise. So I'm going to come back around.
One of my favorite comments, Melissa's so funny. She's like one of my favorite funny people. Sandy Jeffers, too, who was on last night. These people have the best sense of humor in the darkest of times. So when COVID, we talk about once a week, and when COVID first hit and all the toilet paper was gone, Melissa said, I can share this with you because I know you get it, but who needs toilet paper when you've been poor your whole life? You just save every napkin you got at McDonald's or Burger King or KFC, and you got a drawer full of napkins at home because you wouldn't throw a perfectly good napkin out. We've got napkins to last through any toilet paper shortage.
That's very true.
Don't understand. I mean, a can of Dinty Moore stew does not enable anyone. People don't understand what real need is. They can't have any idea how important a place like the Magalia Community Center is.
Right. And that's a conversation that I continue to have at the higher level, because that conversation was unfortunately necessary pre-fire. I've shared with Pat that before the fire we had 7 emergency need food pantries on the ridge. We refer to our community as the Ridge because we're literally on one of the mountain ridges locally. So we had 7. And after the fire, we have 2, this one and Hope Church. And so those folks that needed those resources before the fire, they certainly haven't left the community, especially the ones whose homes survived in our Upper Ridge area. And in our area, we are not a wealthy community. Our local school district, pre-fire, we were at an average of about 70+% for free and reduced or socioeconomic disadvantage district-wide. And those numbers are concentrated as you travel up the ridge into our more rural communities, if you can imagine something more rural than all these trees. And that's the portion of our community that survived, is those highly concentrated areas. And so those folks need more help arguably now than they did pre-fire. And I think sometimes that gets lost on folks that have never been in that position of need. So I keep sort of pushing that message that yes, we still need them. The tents are not beautiful, but for folks that are hungry, they're gorgeous. It's a welcome sight to see that they're still here when you need something.
And they gave cribs to families. I mean, people, when you think about a fire and what you lose, or a flood, or you lose your cinnamon, or when your landlord locks you out and you're evicted and there's a sheriff's sale and they lock the door in your house and you can't get back in there even to get your wallet. Every single need was met for so many people by this little tiny church that was saved by a homeless man. It's just unbelievable poetry how this has really come full circle. And when I was out there, I should never be shocked again, but I was really shocked by the number of people who want to shut this food pantry down.
Yeah, it can be confusing at times. The other thing that that I think a lot of people don't realize is that the surviving homes that we have, you can see there are just a couple across the street that survived. And then the homes in Upper Magalia that survived, those folks had to replace most everything too because the smoke damage was so significant. So they had a home to come home to after several months, but it needed a lot. It had to be cleaned, things had to be replaced, and so they've helped with that too. Two of these tents are clothing and furniture, household items, dishes, things like that, things that folks might need as they either replenish what was damaged or if they acquire a home after the fire. Because if you can imagine losing your entire home, you don't have a fork, a spoon, a can opener, a hanger to hang clothes on. So they gather donations so that folks can quickly put those together.
Where are the donations coming from? Are they local? Or are they coming from all over the place?
They're primarily local at this point, but they continue to see people pop up just kind of from all over the place. I think people, they catch a Facebook post or they hear from a friend of somebody in need, and then word gets spread and they reach out.
Melissa, talk real briefly. I don't know how much time we have left, but talk real briefly about. So there's a part where you've lost your home that's all physical, like we're talking about the coat hanger, but then there's the trauma of losing your home. And when Melissa tells the story, which I can't wait to get this book out because you're such a hero of mine. But when Melissa tells the story of having her daughters and their friend in her car, driving through a fire, all the cars lining the street on either side are burning. The fire is burning. The trees are exploding because the sap in them is exploding. And Melissa's thinking in her mind, there's some kind of crazy where you're afraid you're going to watch your own children die in this fire, And
yeah.
So if you don't mind, if you tell me no, if you want, but share a little bit about the trauma, even though you had a home to return to. And by the way, the home next door is destroyed. So that was also sort of so random. Even though you had a home to return to, you had to get off of the ridge during the fire. Just give us a little bit of that.
Yeah. So I've actually never shared that story with anybody besides Pat, and I've never shared it publicly. So I will try. I can't promise that I can make it through that. But yes, our community that day was trapped on the ridge. I've mentioned a couple times that our ridge community, we are literally the top of a mountain ridge, and the communities that are on either side of us are the top of the neighboring ridges. So there are very steep valleys between us, and the fire started on the next ridge over, which is kind of behind that mountain peak behind me, and it very quickly traveled that valley and into our community. And that morning I did what I was supposed to do. I took my kids to school and I started the evacuation process, both with the school, because I, as Pat mentioned, president of the board of school locally, and then I hold a position in one of the largest local nonprofits. So we evacuated my office. I work with adults with intellectual developmental disabilities. We began that process, and then coordinating with the district and getting kids picked up, and then eventually getting kids on buses for the ones whose parents couldn't make it back to the schools. And then eventually putting kids in teachers' cars and, whatever available vehicle to get them off the ridge. And I was able to get my girls and then one of their friends. Pre-fire, I took several children to school every day because, we live up towards the top of the ridge, and bus transportation wasn't necessarily an option for those kids, so I would pick them up. So that morning, the plan was for me to pick this little girl up, and we were going to go back from Paradise to Magalia, which is above Paradise where I am now. And I was going to take her to her family, and we were going to evacuate over the ridge to the north. There's a mountain pass that will take you up through the mountains and then back to the valley where it was safe. But unfortunately, by the time I got to the school, our northern access was blocked. So we became trapped in the town of Paradise. There was fire on all sides, and all evacuation routes were blocked by fire or traffic. We had probably close to 100,000 vehicles on the ridge trying to leave. So if you can imagine the worst traffic jam you've ever seen in your life, our 2-lane roads became 10-lane roads, and people began to panic and abandon their vehicles, and those vehicles were burning. These beautiful tall trees that we have were burning all around us. And so by about 10 o'clock in the morning, it became dark. It was kind of pitch black, midnight dark in Paradise. And I drove a minivan, which is my favorite thing, my mom mobile. And so we realized pretty early on that we weren't going to make it to Magalia, and we were going to have to make it through the fire. So we sort of frantically wandered all over town for a while, checking all of the evacuation routes, all of the little roads that locals know that can get you out of town. And so what we would do basically was, drive to Clark Road, and if that was on fire, we would turn around and drive to Skyway, and if that was on fire, we'd turn around and drive to Honey Run, and we did that for a number of hours. And then eventually, about 3:30 to 4 o'clock, we got funneled into many thousands of cars that were beginning to travel down Skyway, which is our main access out of Paradise. There are 2 main roads that travel alongside each other, Clark and Skyway. And I got stuck in that traffic jam. And so it became a situation where the only thing I could do was to get in the middlemost portion of those cars. And at that time, I had 2 11-year-olds and 2 13-year-olds in my car, 3 being my own and 1 being a friend. And so we sat at a standstill in active fire for probably about an hour and a half for about 3 miles of travel. And I shared with Pat later that during that, one of the things that is so surreal to me is during that experience when the fire was closest to us, when the cars around us were on fire and the trees were falling across the road in front of us, we kept having these sort of plops of sludge on our windows, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And it took about a year after the fire, I saw a Facebook post. I'm sorry, my voice is cracking a little. I saw a Facebook post that those heavy drops of sludge were actually a water plane above us. They were dropping water on us. But by the time it got to us, it was so full of soot and smoke that it wasn't water. So we were very fortunate. There were very brave people that were working very quickly to move some of those burning cars during that process. They put their own lives at risk to come in with tractors and large equipment and physically push those burning cars out of the way so people could access the escape routes. And so that happened for us, and all at once the traffic in front of us started to move. And I don't think I've ever prayed that hard in my life or lied that much. I kept telling my girls, the roads don't burn. We had just witnessed, as I mentioned yesterday, we'd just witnessed the car fire north of us. So we saw these incredible videos of people escaping with fire all around them, and they're driving on these roads as everything's burning. And so I kept reminding them, remember the videos, the car fire, roads don't burn, we're safe, concrete doesn't burn, it's okay. And I didn't believe that, but luckily they believed me. So the traffic started to move, first very slowly, just kind of creeping, and then eventually we got to about 15 miles an hour, which felt like 75. And we made it about halfway down what we refer to as the Skyway, which is the access up the ridge from Chico. And all at once we popped out of the fire, and there was the most amazing crystal blue sky that I've ever seen. And we were safe. And we made it to Chico. We started evacuating about 8:30 that morning. We made it to Chico about 4:30 in the afternoon. And I was able to return the little girl that I had with me at about 8:30 that night. Her mom eventually stopped waiting for us. We lost phone service very early on because of the fire, so I wasn't able to get a hold of her and tell her that I had her daughter and that she was safe with me and that we weren't going to come to Magalia. So at some point she stopped waiting and she evacuated. And so about 7:30 that night, I got a text message in all capitals, "Please God, tell me she's alive." And so I confirmed that. And then we met in Chico. She was about an hour and a half away from me at that point because she was evacuated north. And we met in Chico, and I was able to return her. So it's a rough story with a very happy ending.
Yeah.
I just want to just kind of really take a moment and allow people to appreciate the trauma that you have gone through and the people that there have gone through. I think that's a part that doesn't get talked about, whether we're talking about natural disasters or whether we're talking about individuals or families experiencing homelessness. These are moments of trauma. And so often we want to just push the trauma away because it's painful. It's as ugly as those tents that you pointed out, and we'd rather just not see them. And that doesn't help anybody because that trauma is real. People have gone through it, and that's part of the process for after. We can't just give whatever. It's great that those things are happening there at that community center, and that's just one piece of it. There's the immaterial part of it as well.
Melissa, your kids are so great. And,
Thank you.
they're so great. And your house is still got people living in it that lost their home.
Yeah.
You have been the champion of the students to be able to stay in school. And you've made a normal life for your kids. And we talked about 3 weeks before Paradise High School was supposed to have its graduation, and Melissa said, "These kids are having a graduation if I have to put every one of them in a bubble and roll them down the," you have just been such a champion, and the fact that your kids they do believe you because you are such an honorable, amazing woman, and I can't thank you enough for joining us here. It's true.
They did tell me when we got to Chico, my oldest said, "Mom, I was never scared because you weren't scared." And I thought, thank you for letting me present that enough that they believed me because I've never been so scared. And one of the terrifying things is that my story is an incredibly mild one. Right. We have, I have many friends that had to abandon their vehicles and run through the streets in the fire and get into other vehicles and leave theirs to burn. And I don't know many people that didn't lose their home. So I'm thrilled that I still have mine. I feel incredibly guilty that I still have mine, as everybody does up here. But the biggest blessing in that, like Pat mentioned, is that we can house people in our home. And so that's been an incredible blessing to allow, another place for people to go. And it's hard, PK spends a third of her time on the Paradise property in the tent, a third of her time at my mother's house, and then at my house, because she doesn't want to burden anybody, if you can believe that. And I want her to stay all the time, but you can't convince her. And then another thing that's important to note is that temporary situations like the folks that you met last night, Dawn is living in a trailer, Alan's living in a trailer, PK is at the tent, Rhea is in a tiny house. Those situations will dissolve January 1st. The town has given statements that January 1st of this coming year, it will be that 750 square foot minimum. And so if you're not in that situation, you will no longer be allowed to habitate in
Live on your land.
Yeah, so we're going to continue to see both because of the evictions with COVID and because of the continued changes in housing in the community, we're going to continue to see those waves of homelessness as we move through this. And, 18 months is a really long time, but we're so early in the recovery process here. Like I mentioned, we have under 300 homes built, and we have under 1,500 permits requested for homes. And so 18 months is not a lot of time when the entire community is lost. So we still need help. We still need support. We still need prayers. That's where we are.
Well, Melissa, thank you. Matthew, thank you.
Thank you.
You've done such a great job. Matthew's done so much heavy lifting in this interview process. And Melissa, I'll talk to you soon, but thank you. And we love you guys, and we love everybody out there. And thank you for bringing this reality of mass homelessness really to the minds of people who don't know what this pandemic means. That's what the potential is, and we've got to do everything we can to work around it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share all that.
See you later. Thanks, Matt.